Thanks, Chris. Perfect. Thanks, Chris. I really appreciate yourself and then the NFCA for setting this up and getting the word out there. And hello to everybody. So as Chris mentioned, been in the industry for a little while. I know there's obviously listening to Mark and talking to Mark prior to the call. There's lots of experienced guys in the marketplace, so it's great to have a little bit of a platform to talk about rubber flooring. And it was interesting when Chris asked me before this even started about a title and where we were going with this. And it didn't jump off my mind right away, but it was one of those topics that I was trying to think of. What question do I get asked a lot, either from a dealer perspective or from an A&D specifying perspective, with regards to questions I get all the time. And I get a lot of, hey, we really like the rubber, and it could be doing a job walk and I could be standing on what would be linoleum or vinyl or VCT even, and I would get the rubber's failing or the rubber's not doing well, and I'm kind of perplexed look on my face, and I would say, oh, we're talking about the floor we're standing on. So they'd be like, yeah. I'm like, well, that's linoleum. Then we get into the conversation about linoleum. So my background has come in handy in that sense. So today, not too many slides, about 20 slides, and really want to have an overarching and overview perspective of kind of where's the rubber coming from. There's all these misconceptions in the market that when I ask the question in a lunch and learn is what type of, who knows about rubber flooring? And a lot of hands go up saying, oh, I know, it's in my gym at Good Life Fitness, or it's in the hotel gym here at the Sheraton. And so the black rubber recycled tires. But then when we start talking about healthcare and all the different products that are out there with regards to, the Manningtons, the Johnsonites, Noras, Mondo, there's some really beautiful products, and the technology on how products are getting manufactured is changing, and the design is changing. So you're getting a lot more different applications and specificity for space, and we'll talk about that. So where does it come from? Well, it comes from all over the place. This was new to me when I was learning about it about 10 years ago. But we have your traditional recycled rubber tires, here locally with, Northwest Rubber here in British Columbia, and Dynaflex also here in BC, Canadian made stuff. So it's great. It's out there. Incredibly popular product, probably some of the more popular products. Then you get into the maple tree, the Nora rubber tree. So we tap rubber, it's out there, it's renewable source, and it's fantastic. That was news to me. I actually did not know there was a rubber tree before I started working for a rubber company. And then you have your pigments, and then that's how we drive. You're going to see tons of photographs in this slide deck, and that's how we drive the colors and the way we can manufacture and get the marbleization and whatnot. But these are all usually virgin materials. You're either getting recycled content from the scraps from the manufacturing going back and being put back into the product, or we're procuring it again and we're adding discolor pigmentation, especially in a lead driven world. And how do we put all that together? Well, vulcanization. I know Chris and I were talking about this actually this morning, and over the last couple of months, and a term we often refer to in the rubber world because it's something that we're just so accustomed to having anyhow. But the vulcanization process, it's heat and pressure, and we're joining the polymers and we're linking the product to create that stability and that strength. And I think if you really, most people, if you ask them what do they think of when rubber is created, what do they look for? And it's durability. The first place we think of that it goes is in a gym or a hockey arena or in stables with livestock and horses and cows, and we stand on it. We make it as anti-fatigue matting. But then you start looking at, we're starting now to see it a lot more in healthcare, in education. So we're putting it in places that are taking an incredibly amount of high abuse, a lot of rolling loads, forklift traffic, pivot points, and that all of that and the durability is because of this vulcanization process. I could speak to it on our behalf, on the Nora side, just because obviously I know it incredibly well. But I do know that 90% of all of the product out there is being made in a colander process. And in that is where we're applying heat, a conveyor system where we're dropping in the rubber chips. It's getting pressed out over a conveyor belt, and then it's being heated at excessive temperatures, north of 300 degrees Celsius. And a lot of times being pressed at well over 1,000 pounds per square inch. And that surface that it creates is the durability side that we're giving back into the marketplace. And you're starting to see, especially in the P3 world that we live in here in Canada, you're starting to see a lot more cost of ownership stake, where they want to see products stay on the floor a little bit longer. So more natural occurring product, so we have less off-gassing, less shrinking in the product, and then you end up with a longer life cycle, which is exactly what a lot of these end users are looking for.
So Tom, let me just ask you a question. Vulcanized. So in something like Vancouver General Hospital, where there's all that rubber product through the corridors into the ORs, is that vulcanized, re-vulcanized, unvulcanized?
Yeah, so all rubber flooring that you will see out there is vulcanized, and the re-vulcanized, I'm not going to speak too much into that, because that's I believe that works more into the horse mat world and more into the what we'll call crumb rubber, where you'll see more of that organic recycled rubber tires, where it gets put back through another vulcanization process to create more density and a stronger bond. Our flooring, or the Nora flooring that goes into the market, and I believe my competitors, I don't want to speak on their behalf, are all in the vulcanized process. We don't go back into a re-vulcanized. And I don't think with the colors, and as you get into a more of a finished product, where you're seeing at VGH and you're seeing in a lot of these K-12 applications, is we can't re-vulcanize already color pigmented product.
Right.
I hope that helps you.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. So to that point, not all rubber is created equal. And I think that's the beautiful part of this, is that Dynaflex will have their own way of creating. Nora will have their own in Germany. You have Mondo in Italy, American built right here in North America. And it's all achieving and getting to the same result, but we're all making it a little bit differently. As we get into a little bit more of the finished product, you're seeing things like the ability to shift the size of the product. So you're looking at different thicknesses. So you get into your 2 millimeters, you get into your 3 millimeters, and your 3.5. 90 things are changing, and you'll see a slide coming up with regards to homogeneous floor versus heterogeneous. 99% of all rubber is a homogeneous floor, so consistency from top to bottom. If we were to, from this side profile view that you see here, there's no mesh, there's no fiberglass. We're not putting any wear layers inside of the products, and that's incredibly important. We're seeing a lot of that being specified in healthcare. And for those of you that are on the call that are specifiers, is why is it better or not better to have that? Well, two things. The aesthetics are a lot harder to change in a homogeneous product. And I know there's been a lot of feedback, when we go into a design meeting, is, do you have anything less institutional? And you smile and say, well, I'm here to specify a hospital. Is it an institution? And people will smile and laugh and be like, yeah, haha, funny guy. However, they're trying to create an atmosphere now that's not less institutional. We're seeing a lot of influence out of the US, where privatized health, for those of you that unfortunately have had to go to a hospital in the US outside of work, they are like palaces. There's times I've been brought in my previous role, I was doing some travel into Kaiser Permanente facilities in California, and you wouldn't know you were in a hospital. It looked like a castle. It looked like a hotel. It was very high-end marble. You had very large format tiles on the wall with water features. You had living walls. It was a very different atmosphere than walking into Surrey Memorial Hospital. And those are things that kind of are aha moments. So when we, the manufacturers, start getting feedback from the design community saying, hey, can we start making products that are less institutional? There are some really interesting things. So there's some technologies, and as some of the photographic slides come up, we can talk about that, where we've had to consider changing from a homogeneous to a heterogeneous, and how do we do that? And there's some pretty cool technology. But with the traditional way of making the homogeneous floor through the vulcanization process and creating these different 2 mil, 3 mil, our 3.5 mil, you start getting in the next slide shows a little bit thicker product into 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, 12 millimeters. You get gym flooring, skate-proof rubber flooring. But what allows this to do, it allows us to really have the conversation about space specificity. And I think that's incredibly important, where a lot of these facilities now, they really want to blanket, if we're doing a hospital and they want to say, hey, we're going to do, and the SOR comes down and we're going to talk about 3 millimeter rubber. Well, that's great. But a lot of times it's a difficult conversation with regards to cost of ownership, pricing front end pricing in the design stage, as opposed to what does it look like in 30 years from now, where we are able to, 3 millimeter in an OR is a little bit more of a viable opportunity. But do we really need the 2 millimeter in a recovery room or in a hallway or in a waiting room in a lobby? No, we can go into a 2 millimeter option there. We don't need 3 mil. And that conversation, in my opinion, doesn't happen enough. And I think that sometimes we blanket everything being thicker, better. We need to make it like that, but that's not always entirely the case.
What are the benefits that are, like, as I'm sort of putting my feet in the owner's shoes here. Why am I paying for 3 mil over a 2 mil? What's the benefit of paying the extra 30%? And is it as simple as that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a great question, and I think we talk about the construction again. So, the difference between a PVC is a lot to do with the manufacturing process and the ingredients in the product. You get into the rubber, you end up with a lot more naturally occurring products, so you have less off-gassing. But the temperature and the way we press vulcanize and all of the that vulcanization process, because it is so rigorous, the product comes out a lot more stable. So what you end up seeing over time is a better installation north of the 12-year span. At 12 years, we start to see vinyl applications where seams are running away from each other. There's some off-gassing happening, which is, everything is at a price point. So great products, but you're seeing a lot more floor changeover sooner, as opposed to the rubber game, where you're seeing that now. You're seeing north of 20 years for a lot of these institutions now. So from a cost perspective, those are the conversations that should be happening, as opposed to the upfront construction costs.
You mentioned to me that with 3 mil, for example, over 2 mil, you're going to get a much more acoustical benefits, which
you will. That'll come up here. We have an acoustic slide here. We'll talk about that and where that factors in, and how, once again, we talk about space specificity and how that will really kind of.
Okay, good.
But here's just another couple of photographs with regards to, we're not just talking about hospital flooring. We're talking about gym flooring. We're talking about, community center flooring. We're talking about outside playgrounds. That's rubber flooring. Those playgrounds that I have 2 kids that love to jump off swings. And when they land on this, it's amazing, the construction that's there as well. We talk about the crumb rubber. You'll hear that come up in conversation, kind of like that upside down egg carton, the black there. So all crumb rubber, all put together, all vulcanized. Great products, but it's just amazing the versatility that's out there. So this is, the conversation when I do ask an A&D firm is, what do you think of? And I get the feedback here a lot. I get, here's the gym, the traditional black rubber in a gym, the puzzle tiles that get hammered together, the skate mats, you see them in a hockey rink, and just different construction and different applications, all great products. One of my favorite slides, I like the donut slide. There's, a few guys on this call that I'm sure I know that are smiling right now. But the difference between the homogeneous and the heterogeneous, I think it's such a generic term. We all know it in the flooring industry. We talk about it. It happens in vinyls. It happens in all different facets of materials. But here's where we really talk about the differences in trying to change visual. So when people are like, I really want a wood look. Okay, well, if you really want a wood look, we're introducing wear layers. We're introducing a potential, not a failure point, but in healthcare, if you were to damage the topside surface, it's tougher to repair. In a homogeneous application, we can weld a repair, you can patch in a repair. It's a little bit easier because it's consistency from top to bottom. We're not really integrating anything. There's no opportunity for bacterial growth and disease to get inside. But when we have wear layers, a little bit more of a compromise can happen if there is a breach in the floor, so to speak. A scalpel gets dropped or something, a nail was dragged through a pallet. It'll wreck rubber flooring. I mean, there's no Superman flooring that, not to my knowledge, that exists. If there is, I'd love to know about it. And Chris, that should be your next education segment. But ultimately, people want design, and this is where we're really coming back around now. So I know from our perspective at Nora, we really talked about how do we change that, and the engineers in Germany got really creative, and we've seen it with our competitors. We've seen it with American Built Right, and we've seen it with Mondo, and it's great. I think there's some beautiful products out in the market now where the confetti look is your meat and potatoes, so to speak, that we're seeing it all the time. However, now you're starting to see some marbleization. You're starting to see some striation. You're starting to see some swirling for K to 12 where it looks like paint was splattered on the floor. It's really some really interesting design. And especially, I use the term again, space specificity. I think there's a time and a place for all of these products to work in conjunction with each other. And I think it's the way we're moving forward, which is exciting to be a part of. Where will you find us? And when I use the term us, where will you find rubber flooring? It's interesting. It took me a while when I first started about 7 years ago. I hadn't really seen it in a full spread hospital. I did a little bit of travel in the US, and the Nora brand there is a little bit stronger than here it is in Canada, just based on population and infrastructure. And to see full hospitals going full rubber, seeing K to 12 higher ed, it's fascinating, and it's amazing. Like I said, all the different looks that you're starting to see. So healthcare is probably the primary, and I would say that even in Canada now, you're starting to see a lot more rubber construction, a lot more rubber spec, especially now with the NFCA. You're seeing it really pushed across. So we do acute care, medical MOBs, medical office buildings, assisted living. We're growing. There's the finances on that side of the business still aren't there to support and see the long-term growth. It's getting better. Probably more on the LTC, on the long-term care, especially on the government-funded projects. Then you get into education. It's healthier product. It's a more durable product, and it's great when we talk about working for staff and for the kids with acoustics, the underfoot comfort, and more and more college and universities seem to be going that way as budgets are tight, even though it's a little bit more of a step up in price from day one. However, the ROI and the long-term growth we're seeing is growing and growing and growing. And then we talked about industry, and Chris mentioned that at the beginning of the call, that industry is kind of my background. So when I took that role at Nora, our focus was strictly the major pharmaceutical companies, the Pfizers, the Modernas, the AstraZenecas, the Mercks of the world. And it was really fascinating to see rubber being used in lieu of epoxy, of all things. And definitely a more ecological perspective. It was a more sustainable product. It was more cost prohibitive. So, and the durability side, there was this, especially when you get Pfizer's on board, and during the COVID stretch, I mean, Pfizer spent over $1 million in clean room construction, just in flooring renovations. They just needed something that was going to work better long term. And then you get your traditional chemistry labs, both in high school and biology labs in universities as well. I throw some photographs in. So as you can see in the one photo, probably the third one along the top line, it's blue and it looks like there's some brown kind of mixed in. And that was the one where there was like paint splatter. So that would be now what we would call a heterogeneous rubber flooring, because that color doesn't go top to bottom all the way through. It's inlaid into the floor. And that technology now you're starting to see a little bit more throughout the competitors across the market. Top left with a gymnasium, you know, it makes total sense. The rebounds, the acoustics, the underfoot comfort, the lines can get painted on top, no problem, with full integration, and or you can inlay the lines. It's, you know, rubber is a great product to have inlays done with.
Tom, how thick is a rubber sports floor typically?
Sorry, I missed that, Chris. Go ahead.
How thick would that rubber sports floor be? Like 6
Yeah, so on the north side, we've done the sports floor with our 3.5 millimeter tile, and a more traditional 7 to 9 millimeter would be more common through a Jur floor. Johnsonite makes a product, more of a rolled sheet goods. I know there's that maple pine look that you'd see, you know, in most gymnasiums.
Stuck right to the concrete slab.
Right to the slab. That's correct. Yep. They'll use a different type of wall base, vented wall base, just because of the thicker and the construction of the facility. It's
moisture barrier.
Sorry?
Moisture barrier?
Depending on the construction, but a lot of renovation would be unknown, but usually, yeah, moisture barrier for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, most adhesives, and we can talk about the adhesives. I got a technical slide near the end. like everybody else, I mean, most rubber manufacturers are asking for 85 RH, but pre-construction meetings and slab control and making sure that that surface and prep is all done no different than we would of any other resilient floor.
Yeah.
Transit, top right, is probably one of the market segments that doesn't get talked about enough. We do quite well on the north side of the business. 75% of light rail you would find a rubber floor in, not always just the Nora floor, but our competitors as well. And that has to do with just the amount of abuse that those spaces will take, and because of the vulcanization process, because of the density and the amount of product inside the product when it's made, you're not getting anywhere. The wear and tears, you don't wear out the product. I've yet to see a rubber floor where the rubber just wears away and you end up with a patch or a hole of the constant back and forth. That is yet to come across my desk, which is fascinating. And the next slide is quite telling. And that's just really, this slide here magnified, just shows us the construction difference. And when we magnify the rubber, you can see the craters aren't deficiencies, but you'll see a lot of times those crater, that moon-like surface is where a polyurethane coating will need to be used just to coat the surface to protect it. But you see why that vulcanization happens and how much tighter that top slide is, that top rectangle is. Underfoot comfort. There's a reason why it's on the bottom of our shoes. That goes without saying. There's also a reason why anti-fatigue matting exists, because it takes load and stress off of our joints, our back. We use this we talk about it in an education setting. And, with an aging teaching population, we're trying to create spaces that alleviate short-term disability, medical treatment, any type of thing that would take somebody off their feet and off their job. So there's a statistic done that the average of we'll use my playing weight at 216 pounds, which those days are long gone. Working on a rubber floor, if you were to weigh 216 pounds, the stress on your joints, so your hips, your knees, your ankles, it's as if you weighed 186 pounds. So that's a significant difference. And we all wish, I'm sure, at time be like, wow, I wish I could feel like I was 186 pounds all the time. But that's we talk about healthcare, nurses. I mean, that's the number one now that all these COVID statistics have come out with, nurse fatigue. Injuries, the amount of walking and all the stats that have been done with how many miles a nurse or a doctor put on their feet traveling back and forth in a hospital. There's reasons why you're starting to see a little bit more of a rubber spec being pushed as well, is because it is a healthy product. It is next to carpet is the next softest. Now, you don't like that word because people assume that it's spongy, but it's not. But because of the rebounds and the underfoot comfort, it makes such a big difference in the world once it's installed properly. The old living in a COVID world slide, incredibly important in today's day. So because of that vulcanization slide that you saw and that magnified slide, rubber flooring is a non-porous product. So we can pour anything on the surface and it'll just sit on top of the surface. Well, we do these tests on a regular basis. We do these stress tests, we do mock-ups, we do test floors. It happens on a regular basis. So, we talk about transmission prevention strategies in today's world are incredible. So some of the questions we get right off in a design meeting is, what is the floor's surface's ability to reduce microbial viral disease? Floor, it's close to 99% because of that. It's non-porous, so the porosity is not there. So you wipe it with any type of disinfectant, bleach, or any of the fungicides and biocides, the floor is coming clean right away. And then with regimented and facility cleaning, it 100% stays that way all the time. So we get into, just exactly what we talked about. So the ability to remain that way over the years of scrubbing, it's not like it comes out of the box and then in 5 years from now, kind of like when people think when warranties expire, all of a sudden the floor becomes a sponge and starts absorbing. Even when you do get discoloration from an iodine or a betadine, that with a regimented cleaning protocol with RPM cleaning, that floor retains itself and comes back to brand new. The other side of that is because of COVID, they're looking for log reduction statistics. All of our competitors, ourselves included, you're seeing a lot more testing done now. Third party, evidence-based design. We're really working towards creating a better space in the sense that, you know, there can't be any questions. And that's another reason why that whole homogeneous versus heterogeneous, most SOR spec in Canada comes down. It is a homogeneous specification. And it usually has to do with, if a scalpel were to fall, what type of, you know, what damage is it doing? And then to repair it, are we ripping the floor out? Can we weld? And we'll talk about, you know, Chris asked me to talk about cold welding versus heat welding or patching. So we can cold weld or repair. And because of the consistencies, we're not worried about integration of disease and things like that. And then what does the aftercare support look like? And everyone out there now, it's all about creating support, a support mechanism on our side, on the north side, with our maintenance tech, with a, you know, installation tech, with the local representation you have in the marketplace. But cleaning the products is such an important part of what we do now, that the support mechanism from the manufacturing side right down to the end user is instrumental.
Such a disconnect between the end of the project and bringing the janitorial service on side to do the right job. And even when you got the first janitorial service engaged, maybe they change after a year, and now you got to revisit that whole thing. I mean, before we got on this call, you were saying something about how, you know, it's typically after sort of 6 months you get a call that maybe maintenance isn't going right, and then you end up on site anyway. Wouldn't it be something to specify a 6 and a 12-month revisit to make sure that the janitorial services are being tuned up so they look after this stuff? Because if you do, it makes a world of difference to the product, how it looks and performs over time.
You know, it's for the other, you know, manufacturer reps that are on this call, it's something we fight on a daily basis. And I think the Canadian market's a little bit different. I know, as I mentioned, I was coming back from Winnipeg yesterday for this exact conversation. And it was nice that in Manitoba Health, you know, and it's not like this in every facility, this particular facility had their own housekeeping, was hired internally. So they're employees of Manitoba Health. But you get into different facilities here, you know, granted it'd be here in Vancouver with Fraser Health or Coastal Health, and they're using, you know, Black & McDonald, or they're using Aramark, or, you know, it's a third party, which is incredibly common, but there's a disconnect too from the expectation side. And it's difficult because the competitors are always, things aren't always the same. You know, some have different coatings that don't require, you know, as much, you know, maintenance. Some products have no wax on top or no polyurethane coating. So there's all these conversations. So I can only imagine what that's like at the actual level of cleaning when that's being pushed down from the top or not being pushed down from the top. Because when I find, Chris, as you and I discussed, is a lot of times these maintenance documents and these maintenance manuals are sitting in the ivory tower and have never been pushed down to the street level. So, and those are the conversations that you're right, we should be having more frequently, because there are some really good products that aren't being used like they should be in the marketplace.
Yeah, our process ends with the instruction the rep must hand the maintenance details to the general contractor, and then it's up to them to do the right thing by them. And I thought it was very interesting. You said that your maintenance instructions are built around 3M pads, which are, you know, the best pads. There's no, you know, when I was, you know, installing and whatnot, the 3M product was the best, but it was also like 3 times the price. And so you better believe the janitorial service, if they don't get told to buy those pads, they're not going to buy them, and no one's watching.
No, great point. Great point. We talk about acoustics. Acoustics in today's world, there's all these third-party studies done with regards to tinnitus and acute noise, and they've come up in conversations I've had at different institutions, from higher ed to, of course, in healthcare. Rubber, you will find, is becoming one of the #1 products now in NICU and maternity. And it has a lot to do with these third-party studies that are being done around evidence-based design and the ability to reduce noise, both in the hallways and in the rooms. And you can imagine that conversation has spilled itself over into K-12. These wonderful children running down the hall, so excited to get hired, to get taught. Because I know that's what my kids are usually doing, but it's loud, and we know that it's not so much the slamming of the feet that's loud, it's the ambient noise. And we've found in these third-party studies that have been done And you would find white papers probably with every single manufacturer, third-party white papers done, showing these reductions in sounds. This slide, really talks about it. And this isn't taking, anything into consideration other than construction of material. VCT becomes very hard. And when it's treated and waxed and maintained like it's supposed to be out of, based on their guide, it's a very hard product. It's very, it's used still to this day, used incredibly a ton, but it definitely has its, nuances. And LVT, we're getting into the same range because of the vinyls, they harden over time, creates a little bit more of a harder surface. So that sound has a harder time being absorbed. A lot of the coatings that we put on these floors as well redirect sound. So we, depending on the wall assembly, the ceiling assembly, there's all these conversations that can be had about, well, what are these numbers based on? Yeah, these are generic numbers. There's, these are just showing a presentation to say the needle does move as we move through the different types of product. Rubber has a tendency to fall with carpet, just below carpet. Everyone's like, are you crazy? Carpet's soft, fuzzy, and it absorbs noise. You're right. That's why we fabric wall panels and things like that. But right below that, for hard surface flooring or resilient flooring, rubber flooring is actually the next one without the acoustic back. Obviously, we start adding to it with acoustic back, a little bit thicker. And Chris and I talked about that as well as we move through the original slide where we showed 2 millimeter, 3 millimeter, 3.5, your 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch material. Of course, the acoustics start to change and drop drastically in that range as well, just based on thickness of floor. It's absorbed.
There's value for building owner right
yes.
there. For going from 3 to 3.5 or 2 to 3.5. I remember doing a education session in a concrete building with concrete walls, concrete slab. We were doing self-leveling compounds, and honestly, you could not hear the instructor, and he was 15 feet away because there was so much echo coming off of all the space around us. Brutal.
Great. No, it is, and it's a great story. And I don't know if I have the photograph here, but very similar to that lobby photograph with the red wall at the bottom there with the benches. One of my first trips, like I mentioned earlier, was to a Kaiser facility in Oakland, California. I've been with the company. I was coming off being with a flooring contractor, so been in projects and things I never really paid attention because you're more about delivering the project at that point. From a manufacturing perspective, you're thinking of all of the added bonuses and the added features and benefits of the product. This particular rep had been with Nora for 20 years, and he asked me to go up into it was an atrium. He asked me to go onto the second floor balcony that overlooked this waiting room, kind of a main common area in this hospital. And there was a grand piano in the lobby. And there was a guy playing the grand piano, and he just walked me up onto the second floor just to have me listen. And we're talking floor to ceiling glazing, open, concrete ceilings. So the opportunity for the sound to travel and reverberate and vibrate everywhere, people walking and coming and going. And what I found was it was a very soft space. The sound was very crisp, but it wasn't annoying. And that background chitter chatter and things like that, everything was just a softer. And that was the first time that I was really kind of privy to the rubber sound in a space. And it really does make a big difference. So if you are creating a space that, sound is of the essence and we really want to focus in on it, rubber would be a great option in that space. Inlays, I get that question a lot. So obviously I threw a couple of photographs up here with regards to inlays. Here in BC, I can't speak to the other parts of the country. I do know they're out there. I've had a couple of dealings with them, but I know here locally with Source Floor and with McCrans, they do a great job, with their design teams with regards to their ultrasonic cutting and or laser jet cutting. They have the facilities to do them here locally in British Columbia. And these are the types of products that you get out of it. Grocery store in Hawaii, that was the indigenous symbol there with the eagle and the headdress was out in Mission. And so totally some of the questions I get on the design side is it, can you inlay in it? Of course you can, get creative. Absolutely.
So are those patterns welded or
how
do they deal with that?
Great question. They're the top left is not, and the grocery store one they did weld, and really was based on the application. So we talked about the stability in rubber because of that vulcanization process. Welding isn't mandatory. You don't get the off-gassing and the shrinking of the product once it's laid correctly in the adhesive. It becomes, dimensionally stable once it's set in the adhesive. Because of that heat and pressure process, we don't get the shrinking and contracting. And of course, we're welding in an OR in a healthcare environment. We're welding. We don't need to weld in K to 12. We don't need to weld in higher ed. But depending on the facility, the one with the stainless steel silos, that was all done in a cold weld system. A little bit different environment, a lot hot temperatures, cold temperatures, lots of acids, bases, chemicals. We really wanted to make sure. So the polyurethane cold weld is a lot more flexible when it comes to that. It doesn't dry out. So you end up with a little bit more flexible and versatile for a very specific pharmaceutical space like that. Stair treads, very generic. I felt I would be doing a disservice to the rubber manufacturers out there if we didn't put a plug in for rubber stair treads. A little bit less vinyl content, so you end up a little bit more flexibility over time. We talk about that off gassing, so you don't get the cracking in the nosings with a correct installation. And the manufacturers out there, Johnsonite, again, speak to all of them, the Mansons, the Ropies, the Noras. There's some really great products in the marketplace. Once again, design, very standardized. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to stand on somebody's raised round disc and know whose it is. They're very generic. They just very popular items in the marketplace.
And quieter stairwells, if that's what you want.
Exactly. Especially in Canada with all the sand and dirt and gets tracked in, they're incredibly durable.
Hey, Tom, I think you guys are the only manufacturer that warranties your stair treads exterior, aren't you?
We are not. I'm glad you brought that up. Everything on the Nora side is all inside, is all internal, no exterior products.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. Base options. There's a couple here that could be Nora specific, but I know our competitors, I know Mondo for sure. There's been more and more with regards to, I mean, as Chris knows, through the QAP program, and if I'm not sure Clayton's on this call, if there's any other inspectors on the call as well, is Flash Cove is so tricky, especially in linoleum and vinyl, that manufacturers are getting more creative. If it's that bottom left photograph of sanitary base, which is a pre-manufactured base that goes 90 degrees, it just adds to the simplicity of the install and less complexity. The middle photographs it's hard to see the welds just the way it comes up here on the screen, but those are boots. So different types of flash code methods, booting as opposed to a boot method about putting it straight on, as opposed to the butterfly method that you would see with vinyl. That really has to do with the density of the product, of the rubber product. They all have a break point. Where vinyl, a little bit more pliable, where you can roll it up into a ball, kind of let it flop open, it'll return to its original state. On the rubber side, because it's similar to linoleum in the way that there's so much product, so when we get it to a certain point on the Cove, it does have a break point. So it flash coves like the linoleum. It's meant to be flashed, but it's not, people think rubber, elastics. It's, resilient. We can it's pliable. It is pliable and soft, but it's meant to be, it's meant to lie flat. And we want to keep an eye on that. So that's why the flash cove method is with the butterfly method, we have a hard time sticking to the wall. It's just easier with the boot method, and with we would use on the outside corners, we would use our cold weld system.
So are you okay to flash 3.5 mil product?
We can, and you're going to see a beautiful photograph in the next. But the preformed base, obviously made to order. We can make it color match. That comes with a thermoplastic Cove on the back, so it's already Cove pre-molded. The corners, inside corners and outside corners are already pre-done. So these are all options on projects. They are an upcharge. However, when you talk to the labor component, they should speed up time on a job site. I'm sure there's some install guys that are shaking their head going, not a chance. So it's always up for debate, but just to know that those are options that are out in the marketplace right now.
Just for those on the call that may not be familiar with the term, boot cut means you're going to miter that corner, seam it at the point of the corner, and then a V-plug means you're going to wrap a plug around the corner so you have no weld at the corner point. Just clarify that.
Exactly. Zoomed in on the flash cove base, and everyone's, because it's riveting information. We've all been, everyone's seen Flash Cove, but up close. So those are 3.5 millimeter tiles that we're flash coving in this particular photo. Cap will work, of course. You have to get the cap to what the specification is looking for. So it could be a PVC cap or a metal cap. We can also run a bead of cold weld along that top edge, which is very common. We do that quite a bit. The Cove stick in the bottom, very generic, but just showing you the point of, we want to make sure that installation is tight. I got called to a project not that long ago where, Mark, you would know this as well, being on jobs where the Cove isn't pressed tight to the Cove stick. And there's a gap where that black Cove stick is meeting the backside of the rubber, the vinyl, the linoleum, and chair foot, in a waiting room, the chairs are going and puncturing through the Flash Cove. It's a very common occurrence. That's why if we go back to that slide 2 slides ago with that sanitary base, we're trying to alleviate failure over time. So a 90-degree angle perforated base adds value because it's flat. There's that less chance of it popping off or the installer didn't do it correctly. So there's all these different methods out there. So if you're a specifier, by all means, probably a good time to entertain a new meeting and a conversation with your resilient reps from any manufacturer and ask them about their base methods and what are some options that are available to you.
I saw a job not so long ago. I think it was around 1,600 square feet of commercial kitchen, and the installers had not put the Cove stick in to save time. And every corner at the flash point where the floor meets the wall, it was split because the cleaning process and like you say, the chairs hit those critical points. By the time they got out of it, they had to rip the whole kitchen out to get the floor out, to get the self-leveler out. And then by the time they started to move forward again, 4 or 5 weeks had passed. By the time the whole thing was done, $250,000 had been wasted because they had to, this commercial kitchen was serving and feeding some 600 people in an old folks home. So they had to cater in 3 hot meals every day for 600 people for 6 weeks.
Chris, I'm just going to interrupt here. Tom, you're at the 45-minute mark.
Perfect. Thank you, Lee.
You're most welcome.
There you go. So Cove stick, who would have thought?
Important item not to forget on a job site. A couple more installation photos. We're not going to bore anybody with more pictures, but just showing the versatility, the colors, that it's not all black recycled tires. It doesn't have to be. Like I said, it's space specific. A lot of these photographs that you see here are tiles. They're not even rolled goods. And which is definitely, becoming more and more popular as well because creativity will take over. Then the key advantages. These are just kind of summarizing everything with regards to sustainability, comfort underfoot, safety, maintenance, stain resistance, and our acoustics. We kind of strike, like I said, there's this time and a space for all of our products, for all the different flooring that is available. And I really, I talk to my team and myself when we go out into the marketplace, we're really attacking the space specific areas and facilities because I feel like it's a really good place to start and show credibility. Because price is, there's no secret that rubber is a little bit more of a premium than a vinyl or linoleum. And we want to make sure that the end users and the buyers are understanding the why behind what we're trying to achieve. And I think this key advantage slide is what we talk about. So the timing worked out perfectly. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Chris, I'll throw it back to you, but thank you for having me today.
Yeah, well, that's great timing. You nailed it. So I'll just throw open to the group. Any questions about this presentation? Questions about rubber flooring in general? Maybe I'll kick it. I had the city of Hamilton phoned our offices out of Ontario and said, they're so tired of having flooring installed in these 2 buildings they have going on right now. They've had LVT, they've had rubber, and they just are frustrated that it's not easy to maintain. This is for low-income residences, and I think what happens is, salt and snow and gravel and whatnot gets walked in, and they don't have a regular maintenance program. And if they did, maybe they weren't doing that right. But what would your recommendation be to swing them back from being frustrated at both vinyl and rubber into one or the other?
Yeah, I mean, I found, I mean, and particularly on the north side, I can speak to it, you know, quite intimately, is that we don't have a coating on the product. So we found it in spaces where there's less chance of any type of machine cleaning. So without a auto scrubber or a swing machine going into the space, we've had some, you know, the feedback hasn't been great. Where the auto scrubber and the Zambonis are running back and forth on a regular basis, it's been a lot more better feedback. However, you know, we know that in BC housing low income projects that getting into those spaces isn't going to work. And we've had a lot of we've had designers put it in their houses. We've had employees put it in, and it's not worked as they thought. So I think there's better products out there for those applications. I think your abuse spaces are still going to be, you know, in my opinion, like corridors, storage rooms, multi-purpose space, things like that. Rubber would be
all the corridors. That's what they were complaining about.
Yeah, corridors. Yeah, could be not reading the document properly.
So are they better off with a sealed surface? Because a sealed surface gives you 6 of one, half a dozen the other. The sealed surface can break down, whereas the unsealed rubber, as you've explained, is very dense and very resistant to becoming dirty over time, provided you maintain it right.
That's right. Yeah. Like I mentioned, if there is a floor out there that cleans itself, I would love for that to be the next presentation, because I get that a lot. Is everyone's looking for a low maintenance or no maintenance floor? Well, we all need to put some type of regimen into our facilities for cleaning, and I think that's one of the first conversations I have with the end users is what is your cleaning regimen? And the feedback I normally get there is like, well, you know, we do this, or we run the microfiber every day. And I'm like, okay, we're not scrubbing. There's just a microfiber. We're dusting is what we're doing. So to your point, yeah, but I use the car analogy with your wax. So, you know, pre-coated products over time, as much as we say that they're low maintenance, but over time that will walk itself off. And it's no secret. We've walked onto projects where the path down the middle is worn and is dull, and 1 foot to the right, 1 foot to the left, we're noticing that it's still shiny. It's still like we purchased it. So there's still a conversation to be had that over time, that wax surface will walk itself off and will need to be reapplied. So it's all about really understanding, one, the budget and the facilities regimen with regards to maintenance.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Any other questions from the floor? I'll throw another one in, actually, that I made note of while you went through one slide. The slide where you had the flooring surfaces under the microscope, 100 times magnification. There was premium and there was standard. How do you tell what you're getting? I don't want to get that information from marketing material, because I just feel like I'm getting hoodwinked.
Yeah.
You know, is there an ASTM standard that says, permeability is, how do you do that?
You know, to my knowledge, I think that's all in the manufacturer's literature and whatnot. You know, when
I just got to trust your smile, Tom.
Yeah, well, it's my hair. Yeah, that's a good question, Chris. I mean, with regards to that, I think it's more to show, and to your point, I mean, we should rejig that slide a little bit, but I think it's about showing the difference in my opinion, in rubber in general, with regards then to linoleum and vinyl, and showing the difference in the manufacturing process.
It's very interesting. If one is better than the other, I would have thought it would be of great value to have a test that actually showed, because all flooring products accumulate that grimy look over time, depending on, and it's the time frames involved are dependent on how successful your cleaning regimes are. But if there is if it is a fact that the premium versus the standard is going to aid the maintenance process and how good that product is going to look in 10 years, I would have thought that was a great, if nothing else, a marketing tool.
Yeah, it's great. It's fascinating when you see them go side by side into a space. We do this often with, I know Mark's on this call, so he'll smile. But like American Built Right or Mondo and then Nora, and you get all three laid on the floor together. If it's a healthcare project and they're all being kind of, compared to each other in a mock-up, it's really interesting to see how they each, because all three are clearly manufactured differently, but all achieve the same result long term. So it's fascinating.
Very much.
Fascinating as rubber flooring can get.
Well, one of the most fascinating floors I've seen in Canada is Calgary's airport.
Yeah.
That road that those buses move along is all your rubber. It's such a
Took a
cool
photo of it
application.
yesterday as I was walking on it, trying to
Yeah.
scramble back from Winnipeg.
I keep thinking I'm in a James Bond movie with Dr. No. It's like,
Yeah,
it's such a great project.
absolutely.
So it gives you a sense of what rubber can do in flooring.
Very versatile. Another great example of why for acoustics. I mean, they're going to put a product that's going to reverberate incredibly loud in that type of space. And it's another great example.
Yeah. Any more questions before we let this road
Mark, you've
warrior
got
go?
one for sure.
Come on, Mark Plowstein, you must have a question.
I don't. Great presentation. We, just as an example, I live in North Delta and we up at Sun God, we have a rubber floor and I'm actually not sure whose it is. I think it's Tarkett, but, we've been going to that rec center for, 15 years. I don't know how long it was there prior. And to this day, it's maintained properly and it looks absolutely fantastic. And I've sold every resilient flooring type that the industry has to offer, and for wearability and for aesthetic and for look and style and design, and for longevity and the floor covering, it's rubber there's very, very little competition to it. So and it still looks fantastic today. So
Yeah.
Great presentation, Tom. Thanks a lot.
All right. Appreciate you for being here, Mark. Thank you.